Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here today. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers of Kesher. And thank you very much if you're joining us again and again. And thank you also if you're joining us for the first time. For those of you who don't know us yet, I'll just say a couple of words about Kesher. It's an initiative that we started together with Sebastian, who you can also see here, 5 years ago now. And our aim is to introduce Jewish communities from all over the world. So we feature speakers from different cities, from different countries, to tell us about their Jewish community's heritage and history and present day situation. We also cooperate a lot with different organizations who work in similar fields, preserving heritage or working with Jewish communities in different parts of the world. And some of you may have seen some of our talks where we partnered with the Together Plan, which is a charity that is based partly in the UK and partly in Belarus. And they are doing an amazing work preserving the Jewish heritage of Belarus. They have so many different projects that maybe at the end we'll ask Deborah Brunner, who is also here with us, who is the CEO of the Together Plan, to share about some of their projects. But today we're going to focus on one specific project of the Together Plan, which is their archive services. And we're very happy to welcome Vasily Zaitsau, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly, who is joining us from Minsk, Belarus, and Carl Kaplan, who is joining us from Boston. They are representing here today the archive services of the Together Plan, and they will share with you the details of how they work and what the archive services do and how you, if you have ancestry in Belarus, may be able to also find out more about your own family. And I'll just pass the word now to Carl and Vasily. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat, and after their presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A. So, Carl and Vasily, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Dora. I'm going to share my screen. Are we all good with seeing it?
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much, Dora, and thank you to Kesher. My name is Carl Kaplan. I am a volunteer caseworker for the Together Plan, and I'm in Boston in the United States. And I'm joined by my colleague, Vasily Zaitsov, who is in Minsk, Belarus. I will do the first part of the presentation. Vasily will follow up. So again, thank you so much for tuning in to Tracing Centuries, Challenges of Archive Searches in Belarus across shifting empires. Many of you, if not most of you, have probably done some genealogy research and found some of the difficulties dealing with Belarus. So we're going to go through the approach we use for archive services. I would add, just as a highlight, from someone, I believe it was at Jewish Gen, explained to me that just in the United States, 1 out of every 6 Ashkenazi Jews can trace some of their ancestry to what is now Belarus. So it's very common to have ancestry there. And for people who want to find their ancestry, there can be challenges, and we hope we can help with those. So this is kind of just to let you know what's possible slide. I'm going to go through this later, but I just wanted to start off by showing you my ancestral pathway that was discovered by the Together Plan, and I'll go into more detail, but this is possible. So basically put, the Archive Services branch of the Together Plan offers a fully custom, or because they're based in London, we use a lot of sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody, what I call Englishy terminology like bespoke, that kind of thing. So we offer a custom or bespoke professional archive services and we have a dedicated team of experienced archivists in Belarus, which is extremely important. Forgot to start my clock. So some important points about the Together Plan. First and foremost, we are a nonprofit. Our primary function is to assist the Jewish community in today's Belarus, which quite frankly, some people are surprised to find out there is one, but there is. we do it in many different ways. And one you'll find is their history, which would include many of you. We've been doing this archive services part for 4 to 5 years, and we've had over 100 clients. Deborah Bruner, our founder, who is on the call, really has been doing this for 12 years. And we just started the archive services 4 or 5 years ago. Again, it's headquartered in London. We do have people on the ground in Belarus, which is extremely important because it's quite difficult to get in there. We're heavily involved in the community. So for example, Artur Lifshitz, who is our country manager in Belarus, is actually also the elected chairman of the Jewish Religious Union. So we're very involved. We know people there, and it helps us do our work tremendously. We do also have connections in places in the region like Lithuania. We're a little bit unique because we don't just do archive services, we have very diverse missions. I do want to point out for people in the United States that we have a sister group in the US called the Jewish Tapestry Project. However, for the purposes of archive searches, those are all done through the Together Plan, which is based in London. It's not a problem for anyone doing archive searches, and we'll explain the process in more detail. So these are the functions of the Together Plan. You can see there are a great many of them. The one for today's talk that probably the focus would be the top one, connecting Jewish people all over the world to their ancestry. And it's important. I know for a fact, many Jews I've spoken with in the US didn't even know their family came from what is now Belarus. There are many famous people. We have a television show in the United States where an academic traces famous people's roots. And if you've heard of the actor Michael Douglas, his family all came from Belarus. So as a side, I love to look up people and figure out where they were from. And if they were from Belarus, maybe we can help find some of their roots. One of the projects, probably our biggest project that we're working on now, is we are the caretakers of over 1,200 headstones from the Brest-Litovsk, also known as Brisk Jewish Cemetery Memorial. It's over 1,200, and we are building a memorial. We're in the final stages of building it and the final stages of raising the money to finish it this summer. If we've actually used it, some of the headstones have given information to some of our clients. So if you have family from the Brest-Litovsk area, you might be especially interested in this memorial project. Here's another picture. It's now being built. Another function that we do is building a Jewish cultural heritage route to tell the story of Jewish Belarus. It goes back a long way. And again, most people simply don't know the history. And the other thing, I'll just mention, one of the other things we love to do is collect family recipes from Belarus. In this case, it was my shocking discovery of second cousins, which is a whole new story. Like, I don't know if many of you have had this, but I was raised and it was quite simple. There's nobody left there and there's no records left there. Don't even bother looking. Well, I can tell you my personal experience is that I found cousins who survived the Holocaust, are now in the US. And this is my second cousin, Luba, who sent me a Forschmeck family recipe. And as you could see from the first slide, my record still exists. So quite exciting to find this out. So now let's talk about the actual archive searches in Belarus. I will pause for a second just to show those photos. We often hear about the archives, we get the results of the archives, but we don't often get to see these big old books that literally somewhere in one of those books are records on my family. So the Together Plan, if you become involved, and we hope you do, we have certain roles. We try to keep a process aligned. So there's the caseworker, people like myself. There's the archive services manager who kind of runs us caseworkers. Her name is Jillian. If you sign up and do an inquiry with the Together Plan, you'll get a welcome email from Jillian. There's the archives coordinator in Belarus. That would be Vasily, who you've met briefly and who will give the second half of this presentation, and then the actual archivists who are going into the archives and doing the research. It's important that you understand that the caseworker is your point of contact. So as a caseworker, I answer all the questions that come from a client. I may have as many as 10 or 15 clients at a time. I keep track of them. I have spreadsheets. We email back and forth. They send me questions. I can either answer them or I send them on to Belarus. When they ask for a search, I'm the one that will get a quote from Belarus, and then only with the approval of the client have an invoice sent from London. It sounds quite complicated, but you'll see that it's really not. And then I keep people up to date with the progress. So some people, like myself, have relatives from other parts of Eastern Europe on this call. My mother's side of the family all came from Galicia in Austria-Hungary. And quite frankly, most of those records are online. I have not engaged a professional archivist. Maybe it's helpful, but I have found so much and got back into the early 1800s just from going online with sources like JRI Poland, JewishGen, etc. The problem comes in when we talk about Belarus, because only about, say, 6 to 10% of the records in Belarus have been put online. So really, if one wants to do a search on their own, they're going to Belarus. So the obstacles are huge. You've got to fly and pay for a trip to Belarus. It's really hard to get into Belarus these days. I think if you watch the news, you'll understand that. You've got to become fluent in Belarusian to talk to the people who work at the archives. You've pretty much got to become fluent in Old Russian to be able to actually read the documents. Then you have to get into the archives. It's not like a public library here in the US or in other countries where you simply walk in. They have to know you, you have to apply. You have to figure out where everything is located in the archives. You also have to figure out where was the family living? Where were they registered? That is a unique thing that I certainly learned about my family, and I'll point that out. And then for most of the year, you kind of have to like snow, which is fine for me, but not the other things. Now, if you're going to engage in a professional archivist, and we hope you do if you're looking for things, there are certainly some others out there, but we do want to talk a little bit about the positives of using the Together plan. We have a trusted team of experts on the ground. We can access archives all over Belarus. It's not just in Minsk. Your searches, we have to pay for the archivists and other expenses, but then we also use your payments to support the charity work we mentioned, like that cemetery memorial, in Brest-Litovsk. We have many testimonials from satisfied customers. I'll briefly show a few, but we have more on our site. We are very careful about maintaining privacy. Something that's very important, the scans for the documents we find are available. We just send them to you when you do a phase 2 search. There's a phase 1 and 2. We'll explain to what those mean in particular. And then we have a very strict process that we follow so that everyone's on board and doing the same thing. Results. Everyone asks, am I going to find anything? Well, the answer is we just don't know, because it's really starting with luck. If the documents are not there, nobody's going to find them. I have gone back to the 1740s, like you saw, for my grandfather, his mother's family, and his grandmother, my great-great-grandmother's family, which is amazing luck. On the other hand, when I talk about my grandmother, who is from what is now Lithuania, I have never found a single thing. And a lot of it is just, are the records there? What we will say is that for phase 1 searches, and Vasily will go into a lot more detail about the difference between phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, about 70% of the searches yield results where a phase 2 is recommended. And then in a phase 2, which is the full search, about 72% of our searches there yield very good results. So that should give you some idea of how to proceed. As I said, we're very process oriented. We have a procedures document, which is always being updated. We use Salesforce, if you've heard of it, to be able to get a look at what's going on with different cases. We have a monthly archives meeting where we discuss some of the cases along with anything new about the archives or about changes we want to make in our process. Payments, as one would expect, can be quite difficult going directly to Belarus. But the good thing is we do online invoices and you pay online, as you can see. Now, again, we mentioned that the organization is headquartered in London, so an invoice would come in the form of British pounds. But as I'm sure any of you who have traveled, you just use your credit card and your credit card company will convert. This is where it all starts. You go to our website. This is the archive inquiry form. You fill out your personal details. Then you fill out what you're looking for. Then you can attach whatever documents, however many documents you have, including family trees. And we will take a look at it once it gets through the waiting list and figure out, can we move ahead? Now, what I must tell you over and over again is that filling this out and sending it in is free. It stays free. You clear the waiting list, it's free. Eventually, when you get off the waiting list, which is about 1 to 2 months now, we ask Minsk, can we do this? They may look at it instantly and say, actually, they will look at it as soon as you send in the form. We don't want anybody waiting on the waiting list if we know there's nothing there. When you go through the waiting list, we will then look at it and say, here's a quote in British pounds. Once you decide to move ahead, and only then do you actually pay. It's very important. So you want to get on the waiting list at events like this. We look forward to getting more inquiries after, but that also means the waiting list gets bigger. Quickly point out that we work in the archives, not on genealogy. What do I mean by that? Well, there's work, I usually differentiate it between work outside of Belarus, finding someone's long lost cousin, doing DNA matches, things like that are kind of what most of you have already been doing. We then take what information you have and go inside the archives. Another thing to point out is that the title of this presentation is Shifting Empires. We all know the borders have shifted many times. You can see in black, that's kind of today's Belarus. But we also know that some of the records for what is now Belarus are located outside. So we have connections in places like Vilnius. We also know that some records for what was outside of Belarus are now in Belarus. That's why we always immediately send it to Belarus and say, hey, we just got this inquiry. Is this something that they should even be put on the waiting list? We want to let them know. A few client stories and testimonials. I like to show mine, not because it's mine, but because from a privacy concern, we want to have permission to show these things. And I gave myself permission so you can see whatever you want. This is what I knew about my family from my uncle's family tree, which he did on a typewriter in the 1990s. This is the slide you saw. It went back all the way to Itzka, who is my 6th great grandfather. I never could have imagined I would have found all this information. The other thing, which is really important, is they weren't from Minsk. We always knew well, they sort of were. My grandfather was from Minsk. Little did we know that in the 1880s, they actually came from Uzda. Even when they were in Minsk, they had to register in Uzda. And Vasily, excuse me, we'll talk about this. Why that's so important is even if I did all those things right and somehow got to Belarus and knew Belarusian and knew Old Russian, I would be looking in the documents only for Minsk, and I'd be missing all this information because really they were from Uzda from a registration standpoint. There's a lot of reasons for that, and Vasily will talk about it, but it's very, very important to know. The other thing that I found was this. It's the 1818 census. My 5th great grandfather, Liba Itzkovich Kaplan. Now, why is this so significant for me? Again, I do know how to see the word Kaplan in Russian, and many of you may know that Jews in the Russian Empire were required in 1804 to get surnames. Before that, it was, as we do on the Bima today, patronymic. In this case, it was Liba Lev, son of Isaac. And apparently this is my fifth great grandfather who in 1804 was instructed as an adult, you need a last name. So he got Kaplan, our family, or our Kohanim, which means, if I sum it up, I am looking at the record for the very first Kaplan in my family, which I found incredibly exciting and was not prepared to be able to find. Other things come out of these searches. In my case, it was a criminal case against my great-grandfather, Usher Kaplan, for illegally selling a bottle of Lipsky beer on the street in Minsk in 1902. It went on for 2 years and in some ways was more of, or just as important of a find as my family history or tree, because it brought kind of a three-dimensional life to a name I only seen on a typewritten piece of paper from my uncle, and that's my great-grandfather. Now, what's really interesting about it is this is just part of this criminal case, and he gave testimony, and he said his name is Osher Yershev Kaplan. He lives on 2nd Hospitalny Lane in the house of Yankel, the stove maker, which most of my family finds this to be the best part because it's almost like from Fiddler on the Roof. I live in the house of Yankel, the stove maker. What's also important about this is I found through genealogy the manifest for my grandfather from Minsk, and he lists his father on it, Usher Kaplan, and there's the address. So the address that I found on Ellis Island matched the address that the Together Plan found for in this criminal case, because we're always looking for confirmation. Sometimes you just don't know if these records really are your family. There's no like driver's license to prove it. Another confirmation was that they found a record for parts of my family in 1921, and all the names line up with information that I found in the United States, which I found to be very important. Another thing I want to point out is from family, I found out using genealogy, my great grandmother's surname. She never came over here, but the name was Margolin. Well, through the Together Plan, we were able to build this whole ancestral pathway. Why that's very useful. You see her on the in red, and I call it backwards, sideways, and forwards. I went back to Belarus, moved to another generation or cousin sideways, and then come back to the US. What do I mean by that is, well, we tell you if they're male or female name. I started looking, hey, this person's male, so they kept most of their name. Maybe they came to the US. Sure enough, I found Borka Margolin. And guess what? When I found his manifest, it lists Usher Kaplan. So another point of confirmation, but using that, I could find the address in New Jersey. I could find out what they did for a living. And then I was able to find new cousins in the United States, which I found remarkable because I would have never found them. So first of all, what's really bizarre is it turned out I grew up in upstate New York. They lived in the next town, but we had to go all the way back to Belarus to find them with the Together Plan. The other thing was, I know there's a lot of talk about 23andMe, but I found them. They were on 23andMe. The problem was they were 424th based on strength of relationship. I would have never looked that far down the list. I never would have found them except through the Together Plan. The other interesting thing was they were listed as third cousin on my mother's side. In reality, they were third cousin one time removed on my father's side. One other last case, somebody asked us about a building, an address they had heard about in Brest. And sure enough, we found out, we took pictures, but we also found in the archives blueprints for the building. Very quickly, some of our happy clients, Claudia talks about how finding documents that shed light on a time and place, like my great-grandfather's criminal case. Lee Dworkin in the UK wrote an article about us, a 3-part article, which is on the website. And Stanley Goldberg had no idea they'd be able to go back to the 1700s. My sentiment exactly. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Vasily in Minsk. I will let you take it over, Vasily, and talk about more about the process in detail. Thank you, Vasily.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for this introduction and sharing with us your story of both being a client of the Together Plan and being a part of us, being a caseworker. Good evening, everyone. Many thanks for joining the talk and supporting the Together Plan and the CareShare organizations. My name is Vasily Zaitsev. I'm Archive Services Coordinator on Belarusian side, and I'm also located in Minsk, Belarus. I'm not an archivist, I'm a coordinator, and my mission is to be a bridge between the research teams that physically go to local archives and manually check documents there, and our team of caseworkers that work directly with clients. Today, my goal is to show you what we do here on the ground, how our internal processes work, and what you can get as a client if you work with the Together Plan. Now let's move on. First of all, I would like to share with you a life circle of every case that goes through our system. First of all, it starts with a web form that you submit on our official website. We'll put a link, to direct link to this page in the chat. After submitting a web form, you'll be put on a waiting list. While you will be on a waiting list, you'll be always updated with the latest news of the Together Plan by my colleague, Archive Services Manager Julian Gruder. She'll always be in contact with you. Also, during this time, me and the research team, we will check if your request, if a search for you should be done in Belarusian archives and not in Russian or Polish or Ukrainian one or etc. So just to understand if your case goes under our responsibility. Recently, it used to be about 3 or even 4 months to be on a waiting list, but we really did a great job of extending team of our caseworkers and also added some coordinators as me to facilitate this process. And currently, I guess if you submit, for example, today, it will take, I guess, even less than a month to be there. I would like to underline that to be on a waiting list, to submit a web form, as many as you want, and to be in conversation with the Together Plan is free. After it, when you'll be taken to works, I'll explain a bit later. The search itself, we split it into 2 phases that we call phase 1, initial scoping, and phase 2, a full around search. Both phases in details will be explained a little bit later. Please, next one. So now let's briefly go through the life cycle once again. First of all, you submit a web form. After it, you'll be put on a waiting list. After some time, you will be assigned to one of our caseworkers that will be your point of contact till the very end. After some session of back and forth questions and clarifications, you'll be provided either with a quote for going ahead with the first step, phase 1, or we will advise you that there are nothing stored in archives that will be relevant for research, and unfortunately, neither us nor anyone else cannot unfortunately help you with your request. Next one. So it is the web form itself. Here you provide us with your personal information and contact data. Next one. In the inquiry details, you provide us with the most, let's say, vital information on persons you're looking for. First of all, these are names, surnames, the approximate years of living, and of course, places where they lived. There is a special field where you can put all relevant information that you have, maybe some about the lifestyle, occupation, address, when they migrated, when they married, and all other relevant information. Also, there is an option, as Carl told previously, that you can attach any documents that you already have. It could be a search maybe done by you or any other genealogist using online services, or maybe even in Belarus, maybe you have some original documents that your ancestors brought from Russian Empire. So everything could be of interest and maybe can facilitate the process. Next one. And once again, I would like to underline that submitting a web form, regardless how big it is and how many of web forms you submit, is free. Next one. We always value when clients provide us family trees, because it easily shows us how people were related to each other. So it just easily shows family composition. I know that in modern world, people use some applications or online services to create these family trees, and that's great. And people usually provide just links to these services. Unfortunately, we ask not to do this and to upload attachments instead of it, because currently in Belarus, lots of foreign domains, like, for example, ancestry.com, are unavailable for a while. So that's why we usually appreciate attachments or even hand-drawn family trees. Next one. Before we move on to the searching process itself, I would like you to learn one very important or even the most important thing that you should always consider if you ever do any search that refers to the territory and time of the Russian Empire. In that times, according to like local legislation, all Jewish residents had to be assigned to a specific place, to a specific Jewish community within a specific area that was called Pale of Settlement. It was just a part of the Russian Empire, and whole territory of modern Belarus was within this Pale of Settlement. Why it is important to know? Because people were recorded in documents like family lists, like censuses, not according to the place where they actually physically lived, but according to the place of their assignment. So in modern words, if a person lived all his life in New York, but was registered in Boston, we should check documents of Boston, not of New York. Unfortunately, we sometimes really struggle with it, because lots of people used not to follow this rule. They either lived outside of Pale of Settlement or not in the place of their assignment, and they did it for lots of various reasons, like maybe for avoid military draft service. It was very common for male Jews, to avoid criminal prosecution, to avoid taxation, maybe to find some occupation, and many other reasons. So that's why to know direct place of assignment of your ancestors is so important, and that's why we decided to always proceed with phase 1 before doing a full search. Please, next one. So here is a comparison of both phases. As I told you before, the main goal of the phase 1 is to determine where your ancestors were assigned to. It is initial step when we check the most informative databases and documents that can show us if we are on the right way, if we are on the right direction, and considering what was identified and how many documents and what kind of documents are stored in our archives that are relevant for your search. I mean, that cover the territory and period of time where and when your ancestors lived. Our research team will be able to estimate the feasibility of a full search and if it is senseless or not. Currently, it takes about 2 or 3 months to proceed with phase 1. It could be less, it could be more, it depends. It really depends individually. I do not want to set specific figures at this stage because, once again, every case is individual and should be discussed individually with every customer. But normally it starts with 300, 350 Great Britain pounds. Phase 2 is a full search, full round searching process when the research team checks almost all available documents that are stored in our archives that cover period and time period and territory when and where your ancestors lived. After doing the search, the research team will compile a report that contains all records that were identified, translated into English. They will also do copies, soft copies, digital scans of all these records, and you'll be provided with the summary at the end of the search. I want just to underline before we move on that during both phases, phase 1 and phase 2, our research team physically goes to archives and manually check documents there. Next one. As I told you before, phase 1 usually lasts for 2 or 3 months, and phase 2 could last for maybe 5, 6, or even 7, 8 months, or even longer. From the first sight, it seems that it is really long-lasting process and could be frustrating from the first sight, but let me explain you in details why it takes so much time. There is a rule how often a person can visit archives and how many documents a person can check per visit. Normally, you can get one attendance in 2 or in good way in 1 week to an archive. During a visit, you can either check 5 documents that contain less than 500 sheets or just 2 books that contain over 500 sheets. So, for example, every census contains over than 1,000 sheets. So during 1 visit, you can check just 2 censuses. For example, if for phase 2, when we have to check about 10 or 12 censuses, we need 5 or 6 visits respectively, which will take 5, 6, 10, 12 weeks respectively. So now I guess you can estimate why it is such a long-lasting process. Please, next one. As I told you before, we have some standards for how we quote for the searching process. We should usually consider next points when figuring out a quote. First of all, this is a number of family lines to look for. So simply say just a number of surnames. Second one, number of places to be checked. In number of places where your ancestors lived. And the last one, but not the least, is the number of archives that should be visited during the search across Belarus. Next one. I told you that a feed always depends on the number of archives that should be visited during a search. I just want you to learn how documents are stored in Belarus, and it will explain you everything. First criteria, how documents are separated, if they were compiled before 1917 or after 1917. Documents that were compiled before 1917, before the revolution and the beginning of the USSR, they are stored just in 2 archives, in Minsk, our capital, and in Grodno, our big regional city with really long and great history. So these are 2 national historical archives of Belarus. So we have team and researchers that live and almost on a daily basis go to archives and check documents. So it is easy to get get access to these records. Documents that were compiled after 1917, I can to sum up, says that they are stored in almost 100 archives across the whole territory of Belarus. So as you can estimate, sometimes we have to send our archivists to business trips to small towns, to small archives to check just a couple of documents, and it really increases, first of all, times that we need for searching process, and of course, costs, and it will increase the fee respectively. Next one. So finally, we are at the stage where I can show you what documents we work with in local archives and what information we can get for you from these documents, from these ancient books. For example, on this slide, you can see cover pages of censuses of Jewish communities. Please, next one. So first of all, every search we start by looking in archive libraries for civil records of synagogues. These are birth records, deaths, marriages, and divorces. For example, on this slide, you can see a birth record. It is spelled in both Russian and Hebrew. Russian on the left, Hebrew on the right. Normally, Hebrew just duplicates the Russian text, with one difference that Hebrew text refers to the Jewish calendar. In these records, we can get such information as who was born, names of their parents, surname, place where they were assigned to, and when it happened. Next one. And it's interesting that birth records of male children often contain information when a boy was circumcised and name of a person who carried it out. Next one. On this slide, you can see a death record. It gives us such information as who deceased, when, where, and sometimes a cause of death. It is also spelled in both Russian and Hebrew. Next one. Family lists and census lists. So family lists, my team really values very, very much and calls them sometimes as Klondike, because in the Russian Empire, families were recorded as the oldest male member of the family, and his descendants from generation to generation with spouses, children, dates, some really important notes, etc. So sometimes we can find a family that consists of 20 or 25 members, and as you can guess, it really gives lots of ways how to continue a search after it. Next one. Here on slide, you can just briefly take a look how many censuses, or before it were revision lists, were compiled in Russian Empire. And I'd like to underline that before 1804, until it was an official law issued by the Russian Emperor, Jewish residents almost had no surnames. So it was mandatory for them to get a surname only in 1804. So checking documents that were compiled before this, we often do not see Jewish surnames at all, and we have to consider a person's patronym, their father's name. So it really makes a searching process really tougher. Please, next one. Name and alphabetical lists. In this ones, residents were simply recorded by their surnames and often only male members. Next one. IDs, passports. These were usually issued only for persons who moved abroad. For example, on this slide, you can see a passport of Polish time, because in the interwar period between the Second and the First World Wars, a big part of Belarus, Western Belarus, was in Poland. Next one. Police department documents and court documents. I really like them very much. They're really informative. And for example, you can see front page of a criminal case against Carl's ancestor for illegal beer trade, and Carl was really amazed with this case, so he really asked us literally to scan and translate the whole book, and as I know, he really likes it. Next one. Personal profiles, really interesting document that was issued in Polish Times too. It was an attachment for applications for visa where people provided all their personal information, some information about even their appearance, and where they lived. Next one. Military draft lists. Very great document that can give us lots of information, not only in person that should be drafted for military service, but also on their family composition, if their other family members are serving or served in army too, and where they live. It was really important for officials to record every male resident, because almost everyone was obliged to serve in the army. So this is why we often find records of boys recorded in these documents at the age of 2-3 years, or even 4 or 5 weeks. In these documents, we can also see a person's appearance, like hair color, eye color, chest size, foot size, height, weight, and many other person details. Next one. Information of a person's property, like list of real estate owners, lists of landlords, householders, etc. In this ones we can find information on property, like its related, how much does it cost, how many buildings were there, maybe there was a bar or a farm nearby, from which materials it was built from. Next one. Business and occupation documents like licenses, patents, maybe some register logs of annual revenue and taxation documents as well. In these ones, we can find information like who owned the shop or enterprise, how many employees were there, and what was the annual revenue. Next one. So I briefly showed you some examples of the documents that are stored in our Belarusian archives, but it is not all the documents that are available. What will be checked for your search depends really on your needs and what is relevant for you. Now I'd like to show you some examples of the reports, so what you'll get as a result. First of all, you can see an ancestral pathway. It is a flow chart where ancestors are listed from generation to generation with indication of their ages or years of birth and their spouses. It differs from a family tree because family tree is one that grows, that you have. In these ancestral pathways, we provide only those persons that were identified in archived documents. Next one. There is an important section, synopsis of our findings, where we sum up all the information we have identified and some information that will help you to navigate through the report. Next one. A section named Documents Checked, where we list all the documents that were checked during the search. On one hand, it will show you how many we did and how many documents were manually checked by our research team, pages one by one. Some documents contain really over 200 or 300 sheets, so after end of the search, you can really estimate why did it take so much time, considering that you now know how often a person can go to archives and how many documents a person can check per visit. Also, it is important that you know what documents were checked, that if somehow in future you'll decide to make another search, there will be no need to check these documents again, because you'll be sure that everything was identified and extracted from these documents. Next one. You'll be provided with soft copies, digital copies of all the records that were identified. Even if you don't read Russian, you can ask any person and they will prove that all our records are true and not fabricated. Also, if you need, we can do hard copies, but it should be discussed extra. Next one. So this is an example of the report itself. It consists of the original record translated from Old Russian into English, and it is followed by a scan. Please note that the language that was used in these documents is far not the same language that is currently used in Russia and Belarus, and contains lots of dead words or terms that normally people don't know today and do not use anymore. We try to transform it to modern English, but we also try to, to maintain its old-fashioned style by using some terms, but we always provide you explanation of it. Next one. So another report. Next one. I'd like to say that at the Together plan, we're always honest and transparent, and we cannot guarantee you results, because archive service is not a restaurant where you can order a dish. And sometimes it is really just a lack, because Belarus went through a tough and dark times of 2 consecutive world wars, revolution, communist regime, and lots of documents were stolen, were destroyed, were burned. And there are lots of gaps between documents that were issued from one period to another. Lots of documents that are stored in our archives are dramatically damaged, and we can use it only partially. Also, another problem that we usually have to face is that Jewish population, when emigrating from the Russian Empire, used to change their names and surnames from original ones to anglicized ones. It is, I can say, easy if a person changes their name from Moisha to Moses, or Morris from Mordecai to Max. But usually people change their names dramatically, especially for the reason to hide from something or from someone, for example, from criminal prosecution, and also often fake their ages to be able to be employed. Next one. So, for example, on this slide, you can see examples of damaged documents. So if we even find a record where we see your family, we cannot use it because we can just see some parts of it. Next one. So since we are almost at the end of the session, and before we finish, I would like you to know that since the fall of 2023, Belarusian archives face some strict restrictions. As I told you before, how often a person can visit archives, how many documents can visit, and generally if a person can get access to archives or not. I want you to learn it. So if you would like to proceed with search in Belarus with any organization, please make sure that they don't have any problems with access to local archives. For example, the Together plan, to solve this situation, we extended our team of researchers, and now instead of having only our own internal researchers and historians, we signed a individual contract with independent research organization, really good professional ex-staff or archives that currently do searches only for us. Please, next one. So since that's all, many thanks for your attention. Many thanks for Dora and Sebastian for inviting us, for giving us this platform to talk to you. So now it seems time for your questions, if you have them. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carl and Vasily, for this very interesting session. And thank you, of course, everyone for being here. And thank you, Deborah, for already answering some of the questions in the chat. I am going to read out now a few questions that came in. Some are quite specific, and perhaps you will have the chance to continue the conversation after the talk with the Together plan, but I'll just read them out and perhaps they can be also interesting information for others. Question from Phyllis. My Belarus family were all from Mogilev. Is that area's archives available to research?
It depends on what time, but yes, it was really big Jewish community in Mogilev, and there are still lots of Jewish communities in Mogilev we work with. So I would recommend to submit a web form. I guess it makes sense.
Thank you. At one point you mentioned that people spoke Hebrew, and some people are asking if you meant Yiddish or Hebrew or both.
Neither me nor people in the research team speak nor Hebrew, no Yiddish, but we have people who speak it, like translators. So, and we can always engage them in the process.
So one of the things I think, just to interrupt that, I think that question came out. A couple of people asked it when you were talking about the records being in Russian and Hebrew, and I think that is the case. But the people would have had Hebrew through a Melamed, so a Hebrew teacher who would have come to the homes to teach Yiddish, Hebrew for religious reasons, but people did speak Yiddish in the shtetls. And there is a book, I'm just about to put it into the chat, which you might find very interesting. It was written in Yiddish in 1913 from somebody who was from Kamenets, which was in Poland but is now in Belarus, and it's actually 20 kilometers from Brest, where we're building our memorial, and it talks a lot about the Yiddish, but it was written in Yiddish, but it also talks about the Melamed and the religious, and actually the tussle between the Hasids and the Mitnagdim. So it's a really, really interesting book if you're interested to know what life was like in the shtetl back in the sort of early 1900s, the end of the century. It's worth a look. So I've just put it into the chat.
Thank you very much. The next question was from Deborah, but not Deborah Berner, but someone from the audience. Someone found the names of my great-grandfather and his sister in the search in an 1893 Minsk state newspaper, Vendomosti. They were supposed to report to a court in Pinsk. I learned that the case was concerning an insult. Is it possible to find more information about that case? And would I learn more about my great-grandfather? He lived in Ibana, Yanave, which were in Grodno, Gubernia, but they were supposed to appear in a Pinsk court.
Such an unusual, very deep and interesting question. I really like this one. This newspaper was called not Vendomosti, but Vedomosti. I know there is like a special section in the archives where these Vedomostis are stored. Not many of them, but this really, really great question. If you share it with us and give us more information, maybe we will not go look through these newspapers, but we'll look through court documents instead, or maybe we'll find out through this record where your ancestors were assigned to and advise you with the next steps. But really, one of the most interesting questions we have received.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. For about Ivanova, yes, there was a Jewish community in Ivanova and in Pinsk too. It was common for Jewish population to move to one place to another. They're not so far from each other, so it depends also on a place where situation happened. So in which court they appeared to.
Thank you very much. And we can take maybe a couple more questions. And so if you have If you would like to ask, then please put it in the chat. Of course, tomorrow we will share all the information that you saw here and the links that were put in the chat and the recording of this talk and also the website of the Together Plan. So you will have the chance to look deeper into this topic. So the next question is from Penny. What does it mean in a report to refer to someone as a burger?
Burger. So burger is an anglicized word. In Russian, it sounds like mещанин. It is a lower social class person that lived either in towns, cities, or shtetls. And it, depending on the person's social class, depends their taxation, their rights, and privileges. So almost Jews were either burghers, mещане, or merchants, traders, etc.
Thank you very much. And a question from Whitney. I'm interested to know if I had any relatives that either perished or survived the Holocaust. Do you look into that information?
During the Second World War, during the Holocaust, almost 1 million of Belarusian Jewish persons were murdered. But unfortunately, information about names and who exactly perished, where and how is so small. Unfortunately, war activities were so significant that unfortunately not much is available. However, we work a lot with Vladimir Melnitsky, our famous historian that specializes all his life in Holocaust thematics. He even published with our help a number of books about all the ghettos, 499 ghettos in Belarus, almost 500,000. It is not easy to find documents about Holocaust, but sometimes it is possible. If you share with us more information, maybe we can help.
This is Carl. I would ask, I mentioned the long lost cousins we found whose family did not perish in the Holocaust. I found them by using, besides the Together Plan, the Yad Vashem Central Names database. So that's also a source, and you start using these sources, and that can be helpful too.
Thank you. And a related question, if someone would like to find living relatives in Israel, do you help with that? Do you do anything with that?
I'd like to just underline the meaning of the words genealogy and archive searches. So this question refers to genealogy. We do archive searches that request physical searches in Belarusian archives, but also sometimes Lithuanian or Polish ones because we have local connections in Latvia.
Thank you. And I just want to tell people that we're actually going to have a talk about genealogy in the end of May. We're going to send you the link where you can sign up, and it's going to focus specifically on genealogy and its challenges and how to do it. So if you're interested in that topic, then please join us then. So I'll read just a couple more questions before we finish. So a question from Mats. My grandmother's documents show that she was born in Minsk, but she used to say she came from Vilnius in the late 1800s. If you have any idea why that might be.
Lots of reasons. And so, as I told you before, a person could be assigned to one place, but all their life live in another one. So maybe she got married and moved to another place, or maybe, and then so lots of reasons.
Okay, thank you. And I'll read the questions that are now in the chat, and then we will close for today. Just a follow-up question about the burger, if a tailor would be referred to as a burger.
Once again?
A tailor. About
a tailor is occupation, but a burger could be a tailor.
Okay. Thank you. How likely are there more records from Ivanova and Motol in the Grodno archives than have been identified by Miriam Weiner or Jewish Gen? There have been very few found.
Okay, let me check. So I know that we did once a search in Motul, so and it was successful, but not really many documents available on Motul. About Ivanova, I guess a bit more. It was in Dragichin area. I cannot say in comparison with Merriam-Webster's library because I'm not very common with all that is available on her website, on her resources. But I
Thank
know that there are documents that are available for research in our archives.
Thank you. And last two questions. So I now see people are adding more questions, but we are out of time, so we will close for today. I will read the last two questions, and we will encourage you to get in touch. You can submit the form as you saw in the link that Deborah shared, and we will of course send it also tomorrow, so you can continue the conversation with the Together plan directly. So I'll just read the ones that I already had promised earlier. Are handwritten letters acceptable as documents where they give names and addresses? If handwritten letters are accepted as documents.
Yeah, it could be because we can go through them, we can read them, of course. But I mean, like handwritten letters, if you do not send it to us, just photos, etc.
Okay, thank you. And Deborah, should we just send you all the questions that came in and you want to reach out, or should people submit to the form?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if they want to, they can get in touch with us through our contact form on our website. So you can just send us a general question through the contact form. But if you actually do want to submit an inquiry, as Carl said, and both Vasily as well, it's free to submit an inquiry. So and that is through the link that I put in the chat and that you've got that you'll send out tomorrow. So there are lots of ways to contact us and ask us questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your curiosity and interest and questions. And we do encourage you to get in touch with the Together plan. They're really, they do amazing work. We think that it's totally worth it to be in touch and send them questions and find out about your own family if you wish so. And tomorrow we'll share with you all this information, and you will have the way to get in touch and research further. So thank you very much, Carl and Vasily and Deborah, of course, for the presentation, for your work, and for sharing it with us. It was lovely to have you guys once again, and we hope to see you guys soon, everyone, in another event. So we wish you all a wonderful rest of the day, or definitely good night in Belarus.
Many thanks. Many
Thank
thanks.
you.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the presentation. And bye, everyone.